Do you feel that in a time when we are more connected than ever, we are drifting away from real human connection, especially to ourselves? I do. Hi, I'm Leticia Latino, and I want to invite you to join me and my very inspiring guests in exploring ways to reconnect to your essence, to your definite purpose, to what makes you tick. Are you ready? Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Back to Basics, Reconnecting to the Essence of You. Some people collect contacts. Jeffrey Meshel builds relationships. He's an entrepreneur, investor, author, and what many would call a master connector. Through decades in business, real estate, and investing, and now several books on opportunity, trust, and human connection, he has explored a deceptively simple idea. Success isn't only about what you know or even who you know, but how well you know the people around you, how you show up for them, and whether they really know you. Today, we're going back to basics on relationships, opportunity, trust, and perhaps the question behind all of them. What makes someone worth remembering? Hello, Jeffrey, and welcome to Back to Basics.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm honored every time I have somebody so accomplished and also working to inspire others through writing and speaking. It's a great opportunity. So if you don't mind, I'd like to go always to the origin story and who young Jeffrey was growing up. Any particular passions or dreams you had as a younger self?
You know, I think when you're young, you really don't even know yourself. And, you know, what happens over time, the experiences we have, the people we meet, kind of forge a way. You know, for me, I always liked people. I am very embracing to people. And the experiences I had as a young person, particularly with a certain job that I had working in an electronics store, really dealing with people one-on-one, made me feel even more touched with getting to know people. It's kind of a silly story, but actually it was very meaningful in terms of my direction.
No, that's great. And I think a lot of people, they call you master connector. I used to be called a social butterfly when I was young because I was always chatting to people. But that personal dimension, I believe, has always been very, very important also as I have built my relationship. So as you started your career, you have, you're now an investor, real estate. Was it very clear what you wanted to be when you grew up? And this is only to inspire our young audience in terms of, sometimes you pursue something that's not your passion and to pivot or change career is okay. Was that a clean way for you?
Well, first, I think you just made a very astute observation. You know, none of us really know necessarily what we want to be or where we're going to go until a certain thing happens or a certain insight we have. I think, unfortunately, today, many young people are aimless or don't really have any sort of guidance as to what is important. And candidly, even in schools, we're taught things in textbooks, but we're not taught things that are really essential in our lives. For me, I collect people. And it kind of sounds like a silly thing to say. Mm-hmm. I have 15,000 people in my personal database. And if you consider that every day we're interacting with people, we meet people. You know, you go to an event, a cocktail party, and you get business cards and you chat with people. 99% of the planet get business cards. They go home, they take the cards, they put them on the desk, in the drawer. 4 or 5 days later, a week later, they find the cards. They have no recollection who they met. They don't have a clue. Why even bother taking the cards? For me, whenever I get a card at an event, I ask questions. I write little notes on the back of the card. I go home immediately and I put that person in my database, where I met them, how I met them, some of the observations. I then go on LinkedIn to see who they know that I know. I've wound up having meetings with the person I know they know, and it turns into a relationship. Every person we meet, not every, but many, are resources, people in our lives that could be meaningful. We're not taught this in universities. We're not taught this in textbooks. And we're taught it every day because we're out there talking to people every day, but 99% of the planet doesn't do what they should do in terms of knowing the importance of knowing who you know.
I love that. Maybe, and you've written 4 books. I have one waiting to be written, but I have the title, and it's Networking with Heart, because I really feel once you network with your heart and like really wanting to know the person, which it sounds like it's what you do, knowing about them, what they like, and just really know that personal human dimension, it stops being networking, and it's just that, collection of human beings that have something in common.
So, I'll respond to the statement you're making because the word networking is such a worn out word, and it really kind of connotes an activity that doesn't necessarily have integrity, and it's sort of like going to a chamber of commerce meeting and everyone's trying to sell you, nipping at your heels. I don't like the word, and I candidly don't use it. I have an organization called the Strategic Forum that I'm
Mm-hmm.
chairman and founder of, and it's all very accomplished, achieve business people with different apertures to the business world. And being part of this organization, it is not a networking group. It is a team organization. And team is a word, but it's also an acronym in my vocabulary. And for the purposes I'm sharing with you, team stands for together, everyone achieves more. Imagine if people really thought about each other and knew about their businesses, knew what they were about, and were mindful of them, that when they're meeting people, gee, I got to introduce you to this person, but with a proactive zeal and enthusiasm. And that's what that organization is about. And it creates so much stuff for everybody, not just business opportunity, but what we learn. Everybody we talk to is a resource dimensionally. We just don't think about it enough.
Mm. I totally agree with you, and I know you're big on and I agree, by the way, with the word networking. Unfortunately, people keep using it, so sometimes I think, like, how can we give a new meaning to it? But I 100% agree with what you're saying, and you've said somewhere that I don't know if in the research I did, that sometimes we get to confuse connections, like people praise how many connections they have, let's say on LinkedIn. But one thing, it's, like, how does that give you access? Sometimes I talk to somebody, you're on first degree connection with such and such, and they don't even know they have that connection in their network. What can you say about that?
Well, look, it's like anything else. There's some work involved, and there's an effort that you put forth. You're not going to know everybody. I had 15,000 people in my personal database. Somebody I met many years ago. I've got stories where someone mentioned a name. I think I know that person. It actually happened yesterday. And the last time I saw that person was in 2018. And I had some notes about them, but I didn't know them well. But I know where I met them. I know what they told me that day because I kept record of it. You know, when you have a lot of people, it's hard to know everybody and remember everybody, but having, a inventory of access becomes very meaningful. I've literally created a company by pushing the word send on my database because I had something that I was needed to do, and I sent out a blast email, and it turned into a company because I know so many people. So
Mm.
not everyone's going to be your best friend. Not everyone you're going to know well. But if we take the time to do the minimum, just some data points, who they know that you never know when it comes around. And in the new book, Know Who You Know, I have some amazing stories, like things that just happened because I live this life the way I just shared with you, and I just like the coolest stuff occurs.
Mm.
Can I share one quick story?
Absolutely. This is why we're here. Share the wisdom.
So I'm finishing the book. I'm at the tail end, and I don't know why this popped into my mind, but it did. I said to myself, "Who in your life has had a big impact on you?" Now, I just said that to you. You might be thinking of someone right away that was very significant in your life. I thought of somebody immediately, and I'm thinking about that person. I'm saying, "Wait a second. The books Know Who You Know. Who in your life's had a big impact on you? That could be an interesting chapter in the book." So I
Mhm.
paused for a moment. And I said, you know what? I'm going to send an email out to some people in my database, which turned out to be 80 people. And I took the potential chapter title, Who in Your Life's Had a Big Impact on You, and I put it into the subject matter of the email. And I wrote, I'm currently writing my 4th book. Title is Know Who You Know. I'd ask you to look at the subject matter. I'd ask you now to pause, become self-reflective, rewind the tape. If you have a great story about someone in your life that so impacted you, either from a business perspective or insight, or changed your life on an emotional level, that was really the person that stands out so much to you, and you're willing to take the time to share the story with me, I potentially will include your story in the chapter. I'd ask you to exclude your mother, father, direct siblings, someone separate apart. As an
Mhm.
example, I'll start. Marty Jamal. I get a job working in an electronics store in Penn Station, New York City, when I'm in 8th grade in high school, being a messenger, deliver packages. This was a store that had no fixed prices, all sorts of chicanery. Everything's on sale. Everything got out of business. All sorts of games. I didn't know anything. I started there, and Marty liked me. And for some reason, in a short period of time, said, Jeff, you got to learn how to sell. Get behind the counter. Fast forward, I worked in the store from 8th grade all the way through college. I became their best salesman. I ran the stores. I created a luggage business. I was so good. This is a little embarrassing. I sold somebody their own camera once. Really true. A little embarrassing, but I actually did. As time went on, it was such an incredibly meaningful experience that I look back at it now and I say, wow, I went to NYU and I got my business degree. That was meaningful. But my business degree at Montgomery Grant blew away that piece of paper. I learned how to look people in the eyes. I learned how to sell. I learned how to read and judge people. And most importantly, I learned and became incredibly confident. Thank you, Marty. You changed my life. You have a great story. Please send it to me. I hit send, 80 people. 23 people took the time to write stories. Another 20 called. The second story that I received was from a guy that I hadn't seen in 20 years. He wrote, Jeff, you wouldn't know this, but I worked in the World Trade Center. And I was at work on 9/11. And my offices were 3 flights below where the first plane hit. And parts of it went through our window. I got hit in my arm, leg, and shoulders. I was in terrible pain. I was bleeding on the floor. Everything was on fire above us. Smoke was such that I couldn't even breathe. And I realized the only way I was going to save my life is to try to get to the stairwell. And I did. I get to the stairwell. I'm going down very slowly. I'm in horrible pain. All of a sudden, firemen started to pass me. One fireman stopped and he said, give me your arm. He took my arm and put it over his shoulder. He walked me down 70 flights of stairs the entire time he and I are speaking. We get to the 10th floor. He says to me, Bob, get out of the building, get out as quickly as you can, get as far away as you can. I got to go back up and do my job. And I listened to Frank. I got out of the building, got away from the building. Shortly thereafter, the building collapsed. Frank perished. I was devastated. This man saved my life. And I learned a lot about Frank going down the stairs. I knew his wife's name, and I knew he had 2 babies at home. My wife and I did everything we could do immediately to try to find his wife and reach out to her. We found her. We embraced her. We got closer. Her kids, Frank's kids, are the same age as my kids. Today, they're like brothers and sisters. We spend our holidays with them almost every year. Thank you, Frank. You saved my life and gave me a second family. I put that story in the chapter.
Of course. Of course. That if that doesn't bring, I'm like, I have goosebumps just with that story. That's amazing.
There's some amazing stories in that chapter, but the book has a lot of amazing stories. So, the breadth of knowing who you know is much wider than what the words say. Yes, trust and common sense in terms of liking someone. I just tell you, and I'll really make this very clear for your listeners to hear the following words. Don't ever go against your gut feeling. Your gut feeling 99% of the time is spot on. If something's wrong, interacting with someone, just feel something's wrong and, they're not evoking integrity or, they're selling you and you don't feel they're sincere, you're probably spot on. 99%. Always go with your gut feeling. It's such an important instinct.
And why is it so hard? I totally agree with you. And once I work in the family business very quickly. And when I just joined, I had worked for Merrill Lynch and Nortel. And I had, I'm thinking I'm going to create big impact. And I brought a deal that my dad said, this is not going to be good. And I convinced him. And he told my mom, I will stop having my name if we see this money back. And he let me do it. And he let me go against the wall knowingly because his gut instinct didn't fail. Mine hadn't developed enough. I don't know, I was too naive or something like that. But since then, I don't allow myself to forget the gut feeling, which is what you're mentioning. But would you agree that sometimes we tend to because we want it so badly to be true that we are to convince ourselves?
I think our instincts, and I think being a good human being, that you want to believe and you want to feel positive about things. In our relationships, things happen. My last book's title was Trust is a Double-Edged Sword. Trust me. And I wrote it because of a crooked partner who's now going to jail. And I was 15, 20 years together. He ran day-to-day operations. I had to shut my company down in 2019, cost me a fortune. And for a long period of time, there were all sorts of weird things were happening, not just in the business, but to him personally that were bizarre. And he always had an explanation. He always had an excuse. And I accepted it. I heard him. And even though I felt it was a little weird, I just didn't want to confront it. I just didn't want to go deeper because he ran day-to-day operations. Huge mistake. I went against my gut feeling and it cost me big time. And we all make those mistakes because our instincts are you want to believe. And then, of course, the trudgery of like getting out of something or something happening is a big issue. I have an expression, which I think I actually have in this book, which is this: good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from bad judgment. We have to learn. And like you learned, and your dad at the time, he'd been around a lot longer than you. And his instincts were such that he felt it. But he wanted you to learn. And he was willing to pay the price for you to learn. And you did. And so every day that we go along, and it's to your listeners, we're all going to make mistakes. That's why they put erasers on pencils. But learn from your mistakes.
That's such a valuable advice. And I'm glad that the one that scammed me, because at the end of it was a world-class scammer. He's also in jail. So I also, I don't wish ill to anybody, but it's also, refreshing to see, because you say, because sometimes people say, if I do good, and in my case, I run the family business and I don't lie. I say I have 55 years of my dad's legacy on my shoulders, and I know I can lie or fail, I stretch the truth to get a purchase order, but then what happens afterwards if you don't deliver? So, but not everybody play with the same tools, right? There's others that are willing to lie or willing to twist the truth, and it requires discipline to stay true to who you are.
It's a discipline, but it's also this other word called integrity. And there are many people that unfortunately have zero integrity. My ex-partner, his wife went off the terrace 3 years ago, and he's still living in the apartment that she went off the terrace. He's married for almost 30 years, has 3 kids. And I don't know, if my wife allegedly committed suicide in the apartment I'm living in, I would never go back to that apartment. A lot of people think he killed his wife. I happen to be one of them. And he's completely stoic. He's like nothing impacts him. He's a sociopath, and he may have graduated to be a psychopath. People that do wrong things, that have no sense of guilt or any sort of remorse, there's something wrong. They're sociopathic, and it's all about their own personal agenda. And unfortunately, there are too many people out there that fit that bill. We got to learn, and just again, back to a statement I said a little while ago: don't go against your gut feeling.
That's very powerful. Anything you hang on to when those things were really, because you're very successful, you help others, but I'm sure, just by hearing the experience that you went through, that you were, deeply disappointed and hurt and distressed. Any way or any practice you use to cope in those times?
Well, there are 2 components of what you need to do. One is obviously we all got to take care of ourselves. Some people, unfortunately, have turned to bad habits, whether it's, drinking too much alcohol or taking pills or, other things that, make them feel better for the moment. And that's not the answer. I'm a big workout person. I live in the gym and I do all sorts of exercise. I did 2 hours this morning. It's a recipe that, number one, it keeps me young. I'm, looking pretty good. I'm in good shape. But 2, the energy and my feeling is incredible. I never get sick. When you have stress and something's really bad, do exercise. Go out and go to the gym. Do something where you're burning calories and you get energy. It aside from it being extremely healthy, it's an emotional reliever. Escaping into things that are like toxic, drugs or drinking too much is not the answer. And we're all going to have these things. There's not one person that's not been violated in trust, either, in business or in personal, or both. And, I've learned the hard way. I've made a bunch of mistakes. I try to get smarter. I'm a very trusting person. I'm not going to stop being a trusting person. I'm just going to be smarter based upon my past experiences. And, that's I think really important to consider.
Very valuable. So in the process of writing, did you ever, was this something that was part of a dream of yours to write, or you just felt you collected all this wisdom and you needed to share it? Or I just want to dig deeper into that process of becoming a writer.
So I had no clue that I could be a writer. I happen to be a word guy, study words as a hobby. But in terms of being a writer, it never really entered my mind. But I've always been like this incredible connector and doing all these things. And my first book's title is One Phone Call Away, Secrets of a Master Networker. And when I never knew that I could write a book, but someone that knew me and got to all my things, and he just kept saying to me, Jeff, you got to write a book. You got to write a book. And I said, Larry, who am I to write a book? He said, listen, I spoke to my dad, my father-in-law, and he wants to help you. He's pretty famous. I said, who's your father-in-law? His father-in-law was Harvey McKay. I don't know if you know who he was, but he was a very famous author, very well-known networking guy. He wrote a book called Swimming with the Sharks. He's an older gentleman. I imagine he's in his latter 80s now. At the time, this was, 18 years ago, something like that. And I knew who he was because he was pretty famous. He said, Harvey will talk to me? Seriously? He says, yeah, I told him all about you. I told him how you're amazing. These things you do, I've never met anyone that does these type of things the way you do it. He wants to talk to you. I said, really? So I get on the phone with him, and he was so incredibly encouraging. And, he was extolling me because of what Larry told him about me. And he said, Jeff, just go for it. I'll if you need things, I'll send you stuff. And I said, really? Just go for it. So I decided I'm going to go for it. And everything I wrote in that first book was all in my head, like all these things I do. And I wrote it on the airplane flying back and forth from Florida, longhand. It took me a year. And I finished the book. So what do I do now? Do I find an agent, or do I just, start calling publishers myself? And I started doing, I said, wait a second, let me call Harvey. Maybe Harvey will introduce me to his agent, which he did. I send the manuscript to his agent. Short period of time goes by. He calls me up. He says, Jeff, I'm going to represent you. I said, seriously? He said, yes, I'm sending you a contract. I'm going to represent you. I said, really? Jeff, I'm going to send you a contract. Sign it. Are you really going to represent? Jeff, I'm going to send you a contract. Just sign it. I literally jumped out of my chair. I was like, I can't believe it. Harvey McKay's agent's going to represent me? Some time goes by. He says, I'm coming to New York. Leave your afternoon open. He came to my office. We spent an hour and a half talking. He says, let's go. I said, where are we going? He said, don't worry about it. We jump down, go downstairs, jump in a cab. We go to Penguin, the publisher. I meet the president of Penguin. Boom. Books in 5 languages, and I'm on the Today Show. That was my first book.
Oh my God, that's so inspiring, so inspiring. I have to get it because it also sounds that I can learn some things from that first book. And I wonder on the master networking. So since you have so much wisdom, did it ever happen to you that you build the relationships, but then and having like transforming strong relationships into business success, into success overall? Like if you approach knowing people just for the people, not for where they can get you, which sounds like you do. Were you ever in a position where you're like, I know everybody, but like, how do I move forward my business? You said you built a company sending emails, right? How is there an ask at some point, or is just by building the relationship, it just comes? Like, I know you have a book also called The Magnet. It's attracting these opportunities to you.
That book's called The Opportunity Magnet. So I'm going to make a statement, which is, it's not about me. If you ask me what I do in my life, I say I do 2 things. Number 1, I'm a salesman. And number 2, I have to make a difference. And I listen to people, and I have a good feeling about them, going back to that gut feeling. And I think they're sharp. I'm thinking about who would be good for them to know, that I know. I go out of my way to make introductions without even being asked, because I want to help people. I want to make a difference in their lives because maybe I have something that'd be very good for them without what's in it for me, without it being a quid pro quo. So if I do this for you, what are you going to do for me? I live my life that way, and things come from the least likely places because just out of the blue, things occur. And the very important thing is about giving, making a difference. I'm involved in some very important foundations. I'm on the streets with law enforcement, giving away turkeys at Thanksgiving where people that can't afford them. I go with police to churches, or I go to their homes and we're handing out turkeys. I mean, there's so many incredible things. And when it comes to helping people, I listen to what people are about, and I'm thinking, who would be good for them? Who can I make an introduction? It happened yesterday. I mean, it happens to me almost every single day. I'm not being asked. I called the person that I met with yesterday. I got someone. Tell me if you think this is a good idea. I'm procuring it without being asked. You don't have to be asked. And if people started thinking that way, not what's in it for me, ask, how can I help you? Amazing things happen. Again, in the book, I have these stories about stuff that happened where I benefit hugely from the least likely place just because I live my life that way.
I'm selfishly, I'm looking for confirmation because I've been accused of sometimes being out of focus just because I like to create also. The when I see a connection or I see that there's value creation or connecting to people, even when, because people say, why are you doing that? Why are you helping here? Why you say, but I just do it, right? But sometimes it happens that, people in your own circle say, well, look, that person did so well because you promoted that, but then they forgot about you. And I say, well, I can only procure the connection and they know who I am and that's it. So I would never look for what's in it for me, but at the same time, sometimes feels that am I crazy? Like, why do you help everybody so much when sometimes people don't come to help you? And so it's validation for me in terms of do your thing and help when you can and giving and being of service. It's extremely fulfilling. So.
Differently said, it's called making a difference. I'll share one quick story. Years ago, I had a banker that handled my company. I used to go to the bank and make my own deposits at that time. And this banker was a great guy. And one day he's not in his office and then 4 or 5 times after he's not in his office. So I go to the secretary. I said, "Where's Cliff? His name's still there. He's still working in the bank." He said, "Yes." I said, "Where is he?" He said, "Well, he had a tragedy in his family." I said, "Oh my God, what happened?" He said, "Well, we're not at liberty. We can't, tell you." And I'm standing there looking at his door and I see his name. I had his cell number, but I wasn't really good friends with him. I'm debating, do I call him? Do I not call him? I decided not to call him. But a short period of time thereafter, he's back in his office and I walk up, "Cliff, are you okay? I heard something bad happen." And you can see in his face, he's in terrible, discomfort. He closes the door. I sit directly across from him and he tells me that his nephew was driving across the Cross Island Parkway, about 17-year-old kid with 3 other boys. They lost control of the car. The car hit the median, flew into a tree. The car blew up. All 4 boys were killed, incinerated. A horrible, horrible thing. His sister, this is her only son. Her and her husband are in trouble financially. Their house is in foreclosure. They have no other kids. He had to borrow from his IRA to pay for the funeral. And as he's telling me the story, tears are coming down his face. What do you say? I mean, I'm like emotionally so impacted just listening to this story. And I don't know why I did what I did. But at the end, after sitting there for a while, trying to console him to whatever I could, I asked him the name of his sister and his brother-in-law, and he told me their names. I went back to my office. I spent the next number of days calling anyone I felt comfortable enough to call to share the story and ask them to write a check to the family. They have no money. They lost their son, $50, $25. And actually, I also wrote a check. I wound up raising $17,000 in a number of days. Wow. A stack of checks. Wow. I go back to the bank and I knock on Cliff's door and I said, "You have a few minutes?" And I close it. I said, "Cliff, I got to tell you, I was so emotionally traumatized, impacted by what you shared. I'm so sorry. I can't fathom. It's such a horrible thing." I said, "But I'll tell you, I'll tell you what I did." I shared exactly what I did. I take the checks, I put them on his desk. He starts to shake. Tears are coming down his face. He gets up and he grabs me and holds me in his arms. And I feel a tear on the side of my face. And I started to cry. And it was such an embracing moment. Fast forward, the bank winds up getting bought from another bank. The owner of the bank dies, and he has this incredible opportunity. He calls me, "Jeff, I need to speak to you right away." I don't know what to do. I said, "Cliff, I have a meeting to please." So I had to cancel my meeting, and he says that he just got the biggest job ever at this new bank. But the team that ran the bank is not going with the acquire. It was HSBC. They're starting this brand new bank in New York City called Signature Bank, and they want him to come along as their number 1 banker. And he says, "I don't know what to do. New bank, and most startups fail. I can't afford it. I have no money. Here, I got this great job." I look at him and say, "Cliff, I'm your friend. You're going to the new bank. They're backed. These are great guys. It's the same culture. HSBC is this giant British." I convinced him. He wanted me to meet the president. He winds up going. It was the best decision ever. Bit of a long story, but I'll cut it off by saying that he went there. It was a huge, great thing. The bank was doing an event. I went to that bank to do my business. And they were doing an event to raise money. About 300 people show up. I have a rule. Always ask the first question. Always ask the first question. Meeting goes on. President comes to the front of the dais. He knew me really well. And my first book just came out. One phone call. And it was just on the Today Show. Everyone kind of knew about it. And at the end, he goes, "Are there any questions?" I fly out of my chair and I flail my arm. And Joe sees me. Jeff, how are you? Congratulations on the book. I ask a question. My question that he shot down the idea, but 300 people in the room looked at me. Literally, I wound up leaving. Cliff calls me up. He says, look, I got this guy, Arthur. He just heard about your book. He'd like to meet you. I meet this guy, Arthur. Today, Arthur and I are doing business together. I go in my elevator in my building that I live in. A woman gets in the elevator. Excuse me, you were at the Signature Bank meeting. I heard about your book, and my husband works in the Jericho. And I start talking to her. A few days later, I'm walking down Madison Avenue. I go to a shirt store, and a guy comes up to me and says, excuse me, you were at the Signature Bank meeting. You asked about opening a branch in Bell Harbor. I thought it was the greatest idea. Joe shot you down. I started chatting with him. He's in my database. I asked him what his name is and everything, and gave me his card. A week later, Cliff calls me up. He says, listen, there's a cocktail party at corporate headquarters. Joe asked me if you would go. He wants to talk to you about something. I go to the cocktail party. He pulls me outside. He says, listen, 2 board seats just became available in the bank. Senator D'Amato is taking one. We'd like you to take the other one. I said, me? Me? Seriously? Me? Who am I? I'm a little real estate guy. I get on the board. I'm very involved. I was on the board 15 years. And in a short period of time, I said, Joe, let me ask you a question. How did you wind up picking me? I've just got this look. Jeff, you're the best networker on the planet. You're a real estate guy. You're a lender. That's important. And you were significant enough to get Cliff to come to our bank, our number one banker. We said, we want you. And I went on the board, which was an extremely meaningful, very lucrative thing for me. But why did that opportunity really happen? Because if you rewind the tape, when Cliff lost his nephew, I did something to help him without what's in it for me. I did something to make a difference, to help his family. And because I did that, when he had to make a decision whether to stay with the big bank or make a move, he knew he could trust me and called me for my advice. Cool story.
Well, you don't know how cool it is, that story, because one of the reasons why I do this podcast is to inspire people and all that. And sometimes I say, I feel selfish at the end because not only I get the text during the day, that's the episode I needed to hear today, or a review online. But then for me, like this episode, really, it's like, okay, Jeffrey's saying all these stories, which is sometimes I doubt of the long sprint. I say I run a marathon. I'm not running a sprint in terms of my life and my career. And sometimes I doubt it. I'm like, is this working? Because, and you mentioned board search. That's an incredible challenging experience to go through when you are in that, first board seats, and you need to understand how it all works. And it's all about trust. And you're right. It's about, normally, if you're just trying to differentiate yourself with sending resume and executive research recruiters, is going to be extremely difficult. It needs to come from somebody you trust. So I think, from the human aspect to how it brought something to you in your life, I think it's beautiful. And I invite the audience not to minimize the power of the human relationship and doing good, because you never know how it's going to come back into your life. So I actually appreciate you going into detail of all that story. So Jeffrey, because unfortunately we don't have all the time, but I do want you to share a little bit about your philanthropic work and the organizations you also support. Anything you want to share on that front?
I'm on the board of directors of something called the CPR Foundation. It stands for Community Police Relations. And this foundation's purpose is to bring community and law enforcement together and try to eliminate, the apathy or the extremism of defund the police, hate the police, all this stuff that, there are people out there that advocate that. And we just do these incredible things that are very dimensional. We bought an ice cream truck in Florida, and we reskinned it with police logos all over it, our logo in the back. Last year, we gave away 35,000 ice cream bars. 2 police officers, one's driving the ice cream truck, the other one's giving free ice cream away to little kids on the street in the toughest neighborhoods where they never saw an ice cream truck. That's just one example. I told you about the turkeys a little earlier. We do all these incredible things. I help them. Me personally, I have a real interest in creating awareness about human trafficking. It's the number one crime problem in our country. It's all over the place. Social media is beyond dangerous, and people just don't know how extreme it is. And it's very dimensional how dangerous it is. I did an event at my place down in South Florida where an educational platform where I had the chief of police there and several people that were trafficked and other high-level police officers to discuss what's going on out there, to protect people, to create awareness. So, I help them with that. And then the foundation, people that are unfortunately go through it or don't have wherewithal, we help them. So the dimension of that foundation is really tremendous. I'm very passionate about it. We do a lot of great things. CPR Foundation, Community Police Relations Foundation. And the second one that I'm a director of is called the Clarion Project. It's a foundation of about 25 people. 24 of them are technology, really bright people that have great wherewithal. The president runs it. The two guys that run the technology team came out of the NSA, and those two gentlemen found Osama bin Laden for our country. And the way we found Osama bin Laden was they were tracking his bodyguards on their cell phones, and they were able to discover their location because of their cell phones. Hence, we took out Osama bin Laden. These two guys were the ones responsible for us accomplishing that. They left the NSA, joined the Clarion Project. The Clarion Project is a foundation that scours social media for threats. The 24 people working are constantly looking for things on social media. Last 2 years, we unveiled almost 200 threats for school shootings in our country. We stopped one in Boca about a year ago. Anti-Semitic activity exploding, stopped synagogue shootings, all sorts of nefarious things where people are communicating, I want to get a gun. And a lot of some states, more of the states that are extremely liberal, don't allow police officers to look at anybody on social media because they call it profiling. I can't believe how stupid that is. Mm-hmm. We put together dossiers and then go to law enforcement where now they have substantive facts where they can do something. So I'm very passionate about that foundation. In fact, I made the Clarion Project an honorary member of the Strategic Forum, both in my New York and Florida chapters, so that people come and they learn about it to become more aware about how dangerous social media is. And those are the two that I'm involved in other things that I will participate financially, but those are the two that I spend a lot of time on.
Well, they both sound very, very meaningful because there are problems definitely on all fronts. So thank you for all you do. I'm in the telecommunications industry, and I know because the cell phones enable a lot of that, tracking and how important, and even our workforce being the, I call them the unsung heroes, installing equipment at thousands of feet up above, but they move so much that they have first row to a lot of these human trafficking issues. So even our industry has a big, meaningful initiative about how you recognize when somebody's in distress as they travel the country, on these remote cell sites. So thank you for that. And then I always leave a little open space for anything I haven't asked about. I mean, you have such an accomplished journey, and you have so many things going on. Is there anything that we didn't touch upon that you want to highlight? Any initiative, any projects, anything at all that you would like to share?
Well, we discussed a lot of things. What I'd like to say to your listeners is I'm one phone call away. If you have a question or I could be helpful, just go on LinkedIn and send me a message and say, I heard your podcast and I was curious about this. If I could be helpful or provide insight or guidance to anyone listening, don't hesitate to reach out. And, I hope what I shared turns the light bulbs on a little bit, makes you see things that you're not seeing or not thinking about. And making a difference is so essential. If everybody did something to make a difference, not just on your one-on-one relations, but get involved in foundations, things that you have passion for, imagine what our country would be like if everybody did things. It's not about me. It's about us. And I guess that's what I have to say.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. The collective, it's always something. It's from me to we. It's such a powerful statement. Well, the last question in all my podcasts is the same, so there's no surprise, at least for my audience. But this podcast is about how we stay connected to what makes us tick. And you share a few things that I know make you tick, but what comes to mind? What makes Jeffrey tick?
I get up every day with a smile on my face. I consider myself to be very fortunate. I'm healthy. I look at the world. I'm extremely concerned about, as we all are, the things going on. I hate the separation and divide. I just want to make a difference. I want to be positive. I'm not negative about things. If I can make a difference, then I've done my job in life. And then, the unfortunate reality is I still think I'm 20 years old. I just can't believe how fast the time goes by. I mean, you blink and the years just fly by. Everybody, please be conscious of doing good, make a difference, care about people, listen to people. You hear something, don't look the other way. It's not about me. I know a guy that I stopped really interacting with because every time I was with him, I describe him as somebody that lives in a room where all the walls are mirrors. All he does is look at himself. He has no interest or care about other people. It's all about him. That's a waste of time. Care about people, make a difference, embrace people that are similar with that type of philosophy, and it becomes very, very meaningful.
Well, that's a great way to end. And I will just add my 2 cents because it's so important when you say listen to people. One eye-opener experience that I've had in the past month is I was born and raised in Venezuela. So when you see 2 earthquakes killing people, like over 6,000 in one blink on a holiday, when people are home at the beach just having a relaxed day, 30 seconds later, they're gone now. It happened recently in Colombia and Philippines.
So,
And you hear, because this happened, in my home country, and people, some that don't even ask how everybody's doing, or that call to see how I can benefit from the situation, and or that you plainly talk about it and they cannot even relate to, wow, that can be me. That can be me or somebody else. And you see this lack of empathy in the world, that we really are not listening. When somebody tells like your story, they said it to you and you felt it and you went and gathered money and see how you can help. So I just take your invitation about making impact and making a difference and really listening to people. For my audience, just know that somebody else out there is struggling. And if you can be of help or support, just don't hesitate, because good things come out of that. And so I thank you, Jeffrey, so much for being part of Back to Basics and sharing your wisdom and your journey with us.
it was my honor and pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And to all of you out there, if you like it and enjoy it, please share, review, and just stay connected to what makes you tick. Until the next time. Bye-bye. You've been listening to Back to Basics. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. If you haven't yet, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on Apple Podcast or any of your favorite streaming platforms. This is the best gift you can give us. Join me next week for another Back to Basics conversation. And if you want to find out about other exciting things I'm working on, visit leticialatino.com. Thank you, and until the next time.